On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
This episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by 5280 Life Sciences Consulting. If you need help setting your strategy, meeting your operational goals, or are selecting and implementing critical technology in your business, we should talk. Visit 5280lifescience.com to schedule a meeting and find out more.
Today on the podcast, I'd like to welcome Patrina Pellett. Welcome, Patrina. Can you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me here, and welcome to everybody that's listening. I grew up in a very remote part of Alaska. And now that I'm an adult and I look back on how I grew up, I know that it was very unique. So one thing that has instilled in me is a love for the outdoors. So I'm an avid hiker and I just adore being outside. I did my PhD in microscopy and spent a lot of time in a dark basement questioning my life choices. After my PhD, I became a technical expert for GE Healthcare super resolution microscope. And this is where I had the pleasure of working alongside Dawn. So Dawn was the global service leader for our microscopy portfolio. And as a technical expert that provided a lot of pre and post-sale support for our microscopes, I worked closely with Dawn's team. Additionally, I'll tell you, if you guys don't know already, that Dawn is also a very avid outdoorsman and hiker.
Yeah, living in Colorado, right now it's like the prime time to go and see the mountains and see all of the snow that's out there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when the manufacturing site for the microscopes was outside of Seattle, and in the summer after work, we would go for hikes, or some of us from the office would go for hikes. And Don always wanted to go, but he had conference calls. And so he would just go on the hike, but take the conference call. So we would be hiking up a big mountain and he would say really random things. And I just have vivid memories of this. Don, do you want to comment on this at all?
Yeah, it's funny because my kids would say something similar. They would say we would go on these family trips and we would oftentimes wind up listening to GE conference calls and things like that. So yeah, thank you for sharing. It's one of my favorite things that, during my time with the API business in Issaquah with GE Healthcare, just the fact that we got to build this hiking group, and the fact that at 5 p.m. on Wednesdays, I would come blasting down the stairs as fast as I could with all my hiking gear, typically to run into the face of very frustrated people who were waiting on me. It was an absolute joy of my time in Issaquah, but ultimately getting to see things at the heights that we did, and just a fabulous site. So just a fabulous group of people that were there. And unfortunately, I was recently told that unfortunately they're closing that site. So unfortunately.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
The Issaquah team they're all looking for things inside of Danaher. I think a lot of the same business that we're describing is now it was acquired by Danaher and was renamed Cytiva. And then they were also, now the microscopy business for the most part is being incorporated into Leica. And so, yeah, unfortunately, a lot of that team is currently looking at their next opportunities.
Interesting. Okay, after my stint at GE, I went to a few different microscopy startups. The last one didn't work out. I ended up getting recruited by a software company that creates software specifically for medical affairs. And this is what started my career in medical affairs.
Okay. All right. For anybody that doesn't really understand what medical affairs is, so in a lot of businesses that I've been in, this question of what does medical affairs do might be something that would come up for somebody. Can you describe that a little bit?
Absolutely. So most pharma companies and medical device companies have a medical affairs organization. And this is a uniquely positioned function in the sense that they are deep medical and scientific experts that have the ability to create relationships and maintain relationships with key external stakeholders. So if you think about this from the perspective of bringing a drug to market, there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that have to come together to successfully bring a product out to patients that will benefit. So a lot of these moving parts have to come together, and a lot of them are not related to internal forces, right? It's external forces. If we have a great product that patients are going to benefit from, we have to get the word out. So medical affairs are educators, they are medical experts, they are insights gatherers, they are relationship builders. So they will go out and educate doctors and other HCPs in a completely unbiased and scientific fashion on medical data, clinical trials, treatment paradigms, etc. Build this relationship with them, and then bring the thoughts and perceptions of the data back internally. So you can imagine from a strategy perspective where you want to influence doctors and HCPs, you need to understand why they think a certain way. So medical affairs is absolutely pivotal to the success of a company, as well as making sure patients that will benefit from the treatments are actually receiving them.
I remember in quite a few of the organizations that I've been involved in, so I've seen different aspects, I would say, of medical affairs. One aspect is very focused on conferences and posters and how do we communicate the scientific aspects of things. And then the other side of things is very much focused on that delivery of patient information and making sure that we really understand how to more or less get what we're trying to work on translated out into the field. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's this kind of your product's value proposition or scientific narrative, and making sure that people, doctors, patients, everybody understands the benefit of the product that you're bringing to the market. Absolutely. There's lots of different functions within medical affairs when it comes to congresses, publications planning, interacting with the different HCPs. You're definitely spot on.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember, at least in one organization in my past, we had different HCPs more or less not using a certain device the way that it was intended. And I remember medical affairs becoming very involved in how do we make sure that this happens the same way over and over again, and that this error doesn't continue to occur either. So just brilliant people in terms of making sure that happened at a very basic and root level.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, so what brought you to Medevoc, and what is it that Medivoc specifically does?
Great question. So the reason I moved over to Medevoc is because of their approach to data and analytics and using data to inform strategy. So Medevoc is a full service medical affairs strategy consulting firm, and we help our clients in three main areas. So insights generation is one. And what I really love about the Medevoc approach is really looking at using data and analytics for this. So we know we don't know everything, but we can go find it out and then back it up with data and scientific evidence. Then we use this to drive decision making and inform strategy. And then the third bucket is to execute on that strategy with different tactical initiatives. So we really act as strategic partners to our client and help ensure medical excellence and that the products are getting out to the patients that need them the most.
Okay. So in terms of those three aspects, right? So how do clients normally find you? What is it that they're looking for that normally leads them to Medevoc?
So the healthcare landscape, as we all know, has evolved to become way more complex and way more crowded, right? There's no more blockbusters, fewer first-in-class medicines, mostly Me Too's and follow-ons. And so when companies are realizing that they need to have a tight ship, very tight messaging, and really have their differentiators super clear, they usually come to us and ask for help and then begin a strategic partnership.
Okay. And then in those cases, I would imagine they don't have the core competency in-house. They're looking for a company like yours to more or less help them in this, or is it in some cases, maybe they do have the core competency and there's just too much work?
It's everything. Yeah, we sometimes will act as an entire medical affairs department for a small company, but we're also in most of the big pharma companies as well from the external viewpoint. So we really help manage and minimize biases. A lot of companies are so inward looking and not focusing on what's going out in the external world. All those different situations that you described, we definitely add a lot of value.
Okay. And then in terms of the way that you typically work with clients, how does it normally work with Medevoc?
So we like to say that we are very high touch, but not annoying. So we really want to take some of the burden off of our clients and help them help themselves do more with less. So we have clear lines of communication, frequent updates. And what really sets us apart and what we hear why people choose to go with Medivoc is that we really act as strategic partners to our clients. So we're looking at the big picture, thinking about all these different things that should be considered. We're not like a box checking agency where we just provide a service and that's it. We're going to look at the whole environment and really think about it strategically and help you make sense of the data to make the best possible decisions.
All right. So great. So in terms of the aspects of Medevoc, there's both a clinical trial aspect and there's a medical affairs portion of the company. Can you just explain how Medevoc works with clients?
Absolutely. I'll start on the clinical trials side and caveat this by saying that this is not my areas of expertise. So I hope my clinical trial colleague doesn't cringe when he listens to this. One of the top challenges our clients have when it comes to clinical trials is around recruitment of patients and retaining them within the trial. We know that there are a lot of trials and resources wasted that from issues around recruitment as well as retainment. So we take this unique approach to data and analytics and apply this to create strategies to help attract patients to clinical trial and keep them in the trial. Our strategy and creative team create really cool messages that resonate with patients and get them excited about the trial. I think one of the key things that I've seen that's led to a lot of the success we've had with our clients and their clinical trials is helping patients understand how being in the trial is contributing. I think this has been really inspiring to see a lot of that work.
It's got to be good to be able to work with an organization like yours, or even think about some of the CROs where they've overcome some of these challenges in terms of trying to get patients or getting them enrolled during COVID and those sort of challenges. Do you know whether or not if they've faced any sort of key challenges given the state of affairs with COVID?
I don't know a lot of the details, but I've seen some reports and whatnot around the rise in virtual trials and being really creative about including or incorporating telemedicine so patients don't have to come in. I think there's, just like on the medical affairs side, there's been a lot of innovation in embracing our new virtual environment.
Let me switch back gears a little bit in terms of medical affairs. So in terms of relationship building, what is it that you normally do to ensure that you have that close tie with your customers?
Pre-COVID, a lot of visiting client sites. Now it's a lot of video calls and maintaining a lot of touch points through emails or text messages. I know depending on, I'll say the age of people, there might be more or less texting with gifts maybe, but it's really about just like when a medical affairs organization is trying to figure out how to engage HCPs, we try to look at the ways that our clients prefer to be engaged. And so this goes from mechanism, right? If you want a text message or an email, and then the frequency as well. So it's really about personalization and figuring out what works best for the client. And everybody has their own preferences. And I think this is really key. Understanding those preferences is key to building the strong relationship and ensuring a successful partnership.
In terms of overall gathering insights and trying to help the client overall end in that endpoint that they're looking for, how does your role really help the clients at the end of the day in terms of gathering those insights?
So I think it's from the strategic partnership perspective. And really, we always talk internally about how we're going to make our clients look good. So I think another thing that sets Medivoc apart is how we focus on helping our medical affairs and clinical trials clients sell themselves. So showing that the work that they're doing is important, how it's impactful, and then how to communicate this. So we've had a lot of success with things like concise email summaries that are good for sharing internally, and advice on who to share internally or who to share with internally. We've done so many of these projects, we kind of have a sense on who all the key internal stakeholders are, and encourage people to incorporate or include all of those people. And then this helps demonstrate the value and then makes them successful.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting perceptions that I have after. So obviously, having been with GE Healthcare and other large organizations, messaging and the way that you message is absolutely critical. And I feel like I've been fortunate in terms of being able to work with some of the most brilliant people in the planet. I don't include myself in that. If any of you've listened to many of the podcasts, I've made this statement before that I certainly don't include myself in this group of people that are brilliant scientists that deliver just critical life-saving things, but they also can't communicate very well. And so, it sounds to me like your company really helps with that, and are a bridge or a conduit for getting that message out there and making sure that people really understand at a grassroots level what it is that they're doing or what impact it should have.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're developing strategies and scientific imperatives, where our chief medical officer and our strategy team are really good at distilling this down and making it comprehensive, but as simple as possible. And so it's easier to communicate. Everybody can grasp it. And then you get alignment across the internally everywhere. And then it's easier to get that alignment externally and have the impact that you're intending to have.
So in terms of the areas of business that Medevoc focuses on, can you share with the listeners a little bit of what sort of things or what sort of companies are you working with in terms of the background of the devices that they're working on, or the drugs that they're working on, or whatever it might be, just so that some of those examples are out there as well in terms of looking at the company Medevoc?
It's easy because it's been everything. So the answer is everything. So the Medevoc's been around for 20 years and has worked in almost every single therapeutic area. And this is really critical when looking at an agency to work with. You want to make sure they have experience within your therapeutic area. And I say almost every single one because there are a lot more focus on rare disease now. And so it's not every single rare disease. And we are extremely experienced at working across the product lifecycle too. So we really take a holistic approach. And if we're approached about launch excellence, we don't just think about launch or what's coming up for the immediate short term. We'll think long term. What are you going to do with this mature product as well? How are you going to maintain your market share? What does the competitor landscape look like? Who's coming up? When are they coming up? So it's across all stages of the product life cycle, as well as all different types of therapeutic areas. And I know that's probably the worst answer. Nobody wants the everything answer.
No, I think it helps a little bit in terms of, certainly there are companies that I've talked to on the podcast that are only focused on cancer drugs, or only focused on AI in a specific type of cancer, or maybe even antimicrobial resistance and only that. And so those sort of things are are, I think, important to understand, because whether you're focused in on a medical device or a drug, it could be, again, another opportunity to look at companies like Medevoc.
Yeah. And what we like to do, we always develop custom solutions. So we know that it's not a one size fits all, but we take all these learnings that we've had with our other projects and clients and pick and choose what makes sense. And so this is where our kind of high touch relationships come in, as well as all of our expertise and experience. So to really create a solution that will have the most impact and make sense for that particular client, their therapeutic area, their device, their product, whatever it may be.
So I'm going to ask the more unfortunate portion of where we currently sit right now with COVID-19. How has this changed what you do?
Well, my first spot that my brain went to is it just made us more busy. There has been a lot of impact in medical affairs due to the pandemic. I think one of the most interesting aspects has been around digital transformation. I think probably people listening on the call are rolling their eyes when I say, oh, pharma and digital transformation, because this has been going on forever. People have been talking about how pharma needs to digitally transform since, I don't know, probably before I was born.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid the T word anymore, by the way.
But what COVID has done has really accelerated this. So there has been a large impact on, or this has already been occurring, but it's been ushered or accelerated.
Mm-hmm.
So especially when it comes to how information is consumed. So we can think about this. Let's say we have a product that we're trying to put out on the market that meets a huge unmet need for patients. We need to get the word out about this product. So historically, if we go way back, what we did would be we would publish this information in an abstract at a congress. This would get presented there. It would then, months or years later, go into a medical journal. And then eventually it would trickle down to the doctors that were making treatment decisions or that were in this therapeutic area. Now, enter the internet, right? This way that information now gets to the target audience or the doctor has changed. So an abstract or new piece of data gets published at a congress. Now it's freely available. Anybody can access it. So this can be doctor specialties, other healthcare providers, patient advocacy groups, patients themselves. They can consume this, they can create their own opinions about it, and then they can put this out into the world. And so we know that in many cases, target doctors or target audiences are looking and consuming scientific information that has been filtered by some person. We call this the digital domain, and you can think of it as the Wild West. Right? You don't. So this traditional way that information, scientific data is translated or transmitted to doctors still exists, but now there's this additional component because of the internet, right? This is not new. The internet's been around for a while. So pharma companies are aware of this, but COVID has just really accelerated it. We see a huge impact or increase in consumption of online content. So it's not just doctors and HCPs, but everybody. Like every single person now, because of lockdown, is spending more time on the internet. So now pharma companies are seeing this huge impact on how their message is getting translated and trying to control this more. So think of this as like a massive game of telephone, right? So you have your intended message. Now it goes into the digital domain. Anybody can do what they want with it, and that can be influencing your key target audience. So this, we've seen at Medevoc a huge increase in helping clients with this. So we will do a diagnostic of what is being said about a disease area, product, a company, competitors, and then help our clients understand if their intended message is actually what they intend. And this is super fun, right? So you look at all the data, you're like, yep, or no, look at this. And so there is so much opportunity around this. And this, we've seen this at Medevoc over the last few years, but since the pandemic, it is just skyrocketed.
It's accelerated. That's great. It's a phenomenal story. That one of the things I've said early on coming into the pandemic was maybe it changes the landscape in terms of the length of time from drug discovery through drug on the street, which you see a little bit with the vaccine, right? They definitely accelerated some things there. I was just saying this to a different guest yesterday, that more or less the thought process, though, too, is that you would think then that that would translate to the broader landscape of pharma, and I'm not seeing it. And that's what I also had related is I wish that these things would just ripple through. And it sounds to me like you're seeing the early stages of that, those ripples in the water that, hey, look, the data's transmitting faster, which might actually result in, hey, look, the people that need the drug or whatever actually get it a little bit faster, which would be great.
Yeah, and then the opportunities around ensuring and understanding the message that's actually getting out there. You have so many examples of strategies or scientific imperatives that are not getting out in a way that's intended. So yeah, there's the aspect of it going faster, but also the aspect of, is it having the impact that you're intending?
True. Yeah, no, that's absolutely critical. So I like to ask the same 3 questions of every guest. What inspires you?
I have been really inspired recently by the resilience that people have been demonstrating in this pretty terrible situation, and the political landscape around it, as well as all the lives that have been impacted. But especially when it comes to medical affairs departments, they have really made the best out of a bad situation. For example, a challenge that we didn't talk about was that medical affairs suddenly had their access to doctors cut off. So with all the lockdowns, suddenly they were no longer able to go out and talk to doctors. So there was a huge scramble. What should we do? But they pivoted quickly and were able to translate over to virtual interactions. And interestingly, on Monday, one of our clients was telling me that in 2020, they had more virtual interactions with HCPs than they had face-to-face interactions in 2018 and 2019 combined. So what does this mean? Access to doctors is increasing, and they've taken advantage of this and are helping more patients as a result.
That's excellent. And what concerns you?
I think while we're seeing an acceleration in trends and embracing digital transformation, there's still a little bit of this old school mentality, especially around why we do things. Oh, we do this because this is the way we've always done it, is a pretty terrible reason to do something. And I think we're all feeling it a little bit, but it is definitely getting better.
And what excites you?
What has been exciting me, I think all the different innovations that we're seeing, especially on the medical affairs side, a lot of these barriers. I know I was just complaining about old school mentality, but a lot of that is going away too. But embracing change, embracing new ways to do things, more cross-functional collaboration. So there's a lot of opportunities for medical affairs departments to leverage and use marketing tactics to help educate patients and HCPs. And the pandemic has really ushered this in. And personally, I really like medical affairs and marketing. So it's really cool for me because it's 2 things I like combined together.
Right.
Yeah. And then before we get off, I want to ask, what has been the silver lining for you in this pandemic?
So absolutely, for me, it's interesting because the transition to a lot more digital just means that I'm spending a lot less time traveling. So it's just the speed that I can get around and touch a lot of people in even one day is amazing, because I can, the great thing about Colorado for me has been, I wake up in the morning, typically about 5:30. I'm normally on the phone about 6 a.m. and I'm normally not off the phone until about 6 p.m. Sometimes it goes a little bit later. I'll work as late as 8 p.m. here. So I'll work as much as I possibly can. And the great thing is that the only reason why I can touch all those people people is because I'm not driving and I'm really not flying or anything else. And otherwise, we all know that we would get interrupted. And so just that ability to touch a lot of people in one day has just been phenomenal. And so, yeah, that's been just a great sort of part of this, even though I hate just as much as anybody. I can't go have a cup of coffee with people. I'm in Colorado. There's tons of breweries here. And so one of the things that we would do before was go out for a beer, and I can't do that right now either. And so I miss the social aspects of it. And I certainly miss going to conferences and seeing people face to face that I haven't seen in a while. So those are things for sure that I miss as well.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say, the silver lining of the pandemic is that I work more. And then I was going to say, you're the only person that feels that way.
Yeah. So I've never shied away from working a lot of hours. I enjoy what I do for a living, and I enjoy especially things like this where I get to experience people more and more. So Patrina Pellett, I just wanted to thank you for being on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here, and also for not just being a guest and answering my questions, but firing back and pulling in my personal side as well. So thank you so much for that as well. So I appreciate it.
I think it's going to be the highest rating podcast yet. Like, people want to know the personal side of Dawn, I think.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for having me. And to everybody that's listening, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, please jump onto LinkedIn and send me a connection request. I'm always looking to connect with more folks and grow my network. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.